Hello guys, welcome to this Unity tutorial, and in this video we're going to be talking about how we can get um, a simple gun system with a gun wheel animations, kind of like if you guys have ever played Halo. There's a two-weapon system that where you can drop weapons or pick up weapons that are dropped by enemies. And today we're just going to be implementing that. This is going to be a four-part series, and in the first part today we're going to be covering the basic weapon switching, and in the next part tomorrow we're going to be covering how to drop and pick up weapons. Alright, so with that out of the way, let us get started. So the first thing you're going to want in this scene is you're going to want an Fps controller, obviously, which we will find in the sample assets. I will link in the description below where to get this asset. And for the weapon, if you have your own models, you can use that, but in my case, I will be using the low Poly Weapons VOL.1 asset that you can find on the asset store, which I'll also link in the description below. Okay, so now that we have our two assets, what we want to do is we want to just drag our Fps controller from standard assets and drag our first gun into the game. So let's pull the M1911, the first character. Alright, so I'm just going to drag the game window out here, and you can see that the gun isn't really centered. It doesn't really look good. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to drag this out, flip this by 180 degrees, and position it however you like. Also, we should also unpack the prefabs. Alright, so now just rotate this, move this to your preference. Okay, cool. I think I'm good with that. Now, make sure to couple this under first-person character, because if you don't, the gun will not follow your head. So let's, for example, if I drag it and couple it under first-person controller, you can see I'm moving my head up and down, but the gun's not following. If that's how you like it, then you can do that, but I'm going to move it under first-person character, so it follows my head. Actually, I think the gun is a bit never mind. Alright, cool. So that is going to be our first gun. We're just going to set this as not active so we can't see in this scene. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put an AK in, also on the first person character. Tilt for 180 degrees. Rotate it a little bit. And then move it to your preference. So if you ever find that the guns are clipping a bit too much, you can go to your camera and you can turn down the clipping thing. Mine is already set down to the very minimum. But if it clips a lot, like I'll show you in a second, like you can see here, so if I turn up my clipping thing, you can see that the gun will, you can see that the gun kind of clips away. So we don't want that. We want to set it to the minimum, bare minimum. Alright, cool. So now when I press play, I should have an AK by my side. Alright, cool. I'm just going to move it out a bit more. Alright, so the first thing, so the first thing that we're going to want to do after we have put our guns in the scene and our character is we're going to create two C#. So the first one's going to be called gun item, and also a folder called guns, because we like to keep organized. Guns, and then we're also going to create another C# script called gun manager. Now we're going to attach the gun manager to the first person controller, and we're not going to attach the gun item to anything, and you'll see why in a second. But first we're just going to enter gun item, and we're going to paste the default scriptable object file path creator into our script. So we're just going to change the two values here. From file name, we'll change it to guns, and instead of file manager scriptable object, we'll change it to gun manager scriptable object. Now you can call these whatever you want, but this is just what I'm going to call them. Now, because it's a scriptable object class now, we're going to delete functions, and we're going to change mono behavior to scriptable object. I'll make a video detailing about how to use scriptable objects and what they are later, maybe later. But for now, all you need to know is that this creates a custom class of object that you can interact with in the editor. The only variable we'll need for now is a game object called prefab. And that's pretty much it. That's all we're going to need. Later on down the road, after you finish the series, if you want to implement more functions in the game, you're going to want to add some variables, like maybe in an integer storing like clip size or magazine size or like damage or whatever. But for now, we're just going to use prefab because, yeah. Okay, So now that we have that out of the way, we can just go back to the scene, let it load, and we're just going to go into our gun manager. Or before we do that, we're going to go into our gun folder and right-click, create, and you can see a new scriptable object has popped up. And we'll press gun manager. And what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to call this M1911, which is our first gun. And we're just going to drag. We're just going to want to drag the prefab that we just had into our game object slot here. So let's just drag that in. All right, and then let's just duplicate this. Rename this to AK-47 or 74. Sorry, my bad. And we're just going to drag the AK-74 in there as well. All right, cool. So next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go into Gun Manager, and we're just going to enter the script, delete the two functions, and we're going to first create an array of gun items. And we're going to call this, I have to make the array. And we're going to call this gun. Now, if we go back to Unity and let it compile. Okay, so once it's done compiling, you can see here that we have now a list of an array. And what we just want to do is we want to go to our guns and just lock this so we don't exit this properties page, and we're just going to drag these in, and boom, now we have two of our guns. Okay, cool. So now that we have all of our possible guns in the gun array, what we're going to want to do is we're going to go back to the script, and we're going to create a variable for our currently equipped gun, current gun, and another gun item for second gun. Okay, so next thing we're going to want to do is we're just going to say public int gun gun int or whatever you want to call this. But this basically this integer will do is it'll track the which gun we're on. So if this integer is equal to 0, then we're going to be subbing in the current gun, and if it's equal to 1, we're going to be subbing in the second gun. Good, so cool. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to say void start. We're going to instantiate actually an object. So we're going to say instantiate, and we're just going to have instantiated the current gun, the default current gun prefab, and we're going to instantiate it. So we're going to add another transform. So we're actually going to add a public transform list of gun transform. Okay, so current gun prefab. So before we actually instantiate, what we want to do is we want to get the transform from the second array from the first array. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to say we're going to create a new temporary variable, and we're going to call this gun transform is equal to or temp gun transform is going to be equal to or actually no. First we're going to have a so first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a loop, and we're going to loop through for int I is equal to 0, we're going to, if I is less than the guns array, guns.length, we're going to loop through the first gun array, and what we're going to do is we're going to search for if current gun is equal to the current equipped gun is equal to gun I. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to create a public variable. So we're going to say var temp gun or current gun index. And we're going to set this to -1, so it's not a value, so it's not a possible value. And then we're just going to say current gun index is equal to I. And we're going to actually just break out of the array or the for loop. And if it's not, then we're just going to let the for loop keep happening. Okay, cool. So what this is essentially going to do is so we can actually just also after the for loop, we can print actually the per gun index, and I'll show you an example of how this works. But for now, we're just gonna actually just comment this out. Alright, so now let's go back into Unity, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have an error apparently. Okay, sorry, I forgot to set my colon there. So now let's go back into Unity, wait for it to compile. And okay, so let's just put a default current gun, and we're just going to make it the AK. And the second gun for now can be the M1. Now when we press play, we can see that the current gun is 0, is index 0 on the array. Now if we actually just switch this up, the current gun, it will display 1, because the index will be 1. Okay, cool. So now that we know that, we're going to put in our position transforms. We're going to actually, so for the first transform, we're going to have to make sure that this array matches up with the guns array. So we're going to drag the AK in first into this array. So now the transform of the AK that we have decided is set, and we're going to drag the M1 now. Right now we can delete these two because they're no longer need, and unlock it. Okay, cool. So basically, or sorry, I can't delete it. Alright, what we can do actually is we can make these prefabs, and then we can drag the transform of the prefabs into gun transform. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to create a new folder called gun transform prefab, and then drag this. Now we can just delete these two, and over here for the transforms, we're just going to have the prefab transform. Oh wait, cool. So now we can go back into our script, and what we're going to do after the for loop is we're going to just say, we're just going to print the transform, print gun transform, cur gun index. And basically what this will do is that, dot position. Alright, there we go. So basically what this is going to do is that it's going to return to us the correct position of the selected gun that we're going to be using. Now if we press play, it should display 0.1, 0, 0, and 0.3, and we can go double check into in our prefab place, and we can see that it is indeed 0.1, 0, and 0.3. It's rounded, but it should still do the trick. So now that we know this works, what we can do is we can just instantiate the prefab. So what we're going to say is instantiate gun transforms cur gun index. Let me, if I can spell it, cur gun index dot position. Or sorry, no, this should be the position, and cur gun transform cur gun index dot rotation, and our first variable that we're going to be passing in should be cur gun dot prefab. Okay, so basically, if you don't know what instantiate is, basically every time you instantiate, you need to pass in 3 variables. So the first variable is going to be the current gun is going to be what you're instantiating. So in our case, we're instantiating the prefab for the current gun, and the second gun, or the second variable, will be where you're going to be creating the gun, or the transform of where you're going to be instantiating the gun. So in our case, it'll be our second array's position, and our third variable will be the rotation of the gun, and it's all stored in the second array and the first array. So now, when we go back and when we press play, what's going to happen is when we press play, an M111 will be spawned, or it should be spawned, instantiated, sorry. But it's not being instantiated. So what is the problem? Oh, okay, so I know what the problem is. So when we press play, you can see that the gun is actually instantiated, but it's not coupled to our first-person character. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to say var give this a random name like var temp instantiated gun is equal to that, and we're just going to say instantiated gun dot transform dot set parent, and then we're just going to get transform dot this. So transform or this dot transform. Sorry. Alright, cool. So what this is essentially saying is that we're just going to instantiate the gun, okay, and we're going to set the newly instantiated gun's parent as the as our character transform, or what the transform of what the characters or of what the script is attached to. So the reason we're doing this is because if I create a 3D object in the scene and it has 1, 11, and 11 for X and Z, it's going to be completely different from if we drag it on the first person character. You see the value change. If we put it to 1 and 11, it'll be somewhere very different. So this is why coupling matters and parents matter. Parents in Unity matter. And I'll get deeper into it in another video. So now when we press play, you can see it still doesn't work, but this is because that we don't actually set the transform after. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say instantiated gun dot transform dot is equal to actually gun transform cur gun index or sorry dot position is equal to cur gun index dot position. Okay, so essentially why it didn't work back there is because the values still stay the same even after we set the parent. So if we created a cube at let's say -1 and 6.8, it'll stay there. It'll stay and be still -1.9 and 6.8 even after it gets set to the parent object, and instead of changing like what it did just there. So this is why we need to set the transform again. Okay, so now before we leave and go back to Unity, what we want to do is actually want to just change this to local position instead of position, and we just want to erase this comment. Okay, so now when we go back into Unity, you can see that when we press play, it instantiates. And now what we want to do is we also want to make it so that when you scroll, you switch between the two buttons. So now we actually don't need this variable. What we can actually just do is we can just say gun is equal to -1 on default, and we can just change this to gun. It's better to have a global variable instead of a local one. And we just paste these in. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to say void update. So every single frame we're going to be checking. Or actually late update also works. I like late update a bit more because it doesn't check every single frame, so it saves on computational power. Alright, so now what we want to do is we're just going to check every single frame. So if input.get axis mouse scroll wheel, and you have to type exactly this, or Unity won't recognize that you're checking for a scroll wheel. So it's we just want to say if it is greater than 0, then that means we scroll a certain way, and else if or I guess just else, I guess, or no, yeah, else, then we scroll the other way. So now what we want to do is basically if we scroll up, then we're going to increase gun int plus plus. And then if else, we're actually going to make this int minus. Now actually gun int and current gun int needs to be two different variables. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to create a variable called that and paste this in. Okay. Okay, sorry, never mind. You don't need to change that. that is all good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change this, and on mouse scroll wheel change, what we're going to do is we're going to fire another function, and we're just going to call this weapon change. And inside these open close curly brackets, we're going to say we're going to switch between the guns. So we're going to say if current gun int is equal to 0, then we're going to switch to the first weapon. Else if current gun int is less than or equal or less than 0, we can just do, or sorry, greater than 0. We can technically just do equal to 1, but it's better to do greater than 0 just in case somehow there's a 2. So actually we might actually just do less than or equal to 0 instead. But anyways, okay. So now that we have stated this, we just want to call the variable. So we're going to say weapon change under events. And so if it is less than or equal to 0, we're going to instantiate the first gun. So we're just going to copy all of this. And instead of current gun though, we're going to, or actually no, for this we're going to say current gun, and for over here we're going to say second gun. And instead of current gun, we're going to say second gun. So now when we go back into Unity, everything should work. So now we're going to just press play, and you can see, or sorry, okay. So what's happening right now is that what's happening right now is that if instead, okay, so I said else, which means that if mouse scroll wheel is equal to 0, then it'll also just instantiate, which is not how it should be working. So what we want is else if input dot get axis mouse scroll wheel is less than 0. Because if it's 0, that means nothing's moving, and if nothing's moving, we don't want to do it. So only then will we change the weapon. And also what we want to do is we want to actually just delete the current equipped gun. So how we're going to do this, we're just going to store a variable called public game object current gun obj. So we're just, when we instantiate gun, we're just going to say current gun obj dot destroy, or sorry, destroy current gun obj. And after we destroy it, we're just going to set the newly instantiated gun as the current gun obj. So this just makes sure that we always can keep track of where the current gun is, and we can destroy the current gun after we have instantiated new one. Destroy. Just copy this down here. Okay, cool. So now let's just go back to Unity, let it compile, and now I'm just going to drag the game tab back, and now when you press play, you should see what's happening. Okay, so gun in is changing. Oh yeah, okay, so I see what's happening. Yeah, okay. Alright, so we forgot to set a boundary. So what we want to do is current gun in will only add is equal to 0, then we will add the current gun in. But if it is not equal to 0, then we're actually going to set current gun int to 0. And same here. So if current gun int is equal to 1 or 0, or yeah, sure, 0, current gun int minus. Else current gun. Because there's only 2 possibilities. If there were 3, we'd do something different, but since there's only 2, it's only 1 or 0, right? Now we're gonna go back to the game. Yeah, okay, this works. So you can see it's changed. I don't know what's happening. Let's just print. So we just want to change it to 0. So we just want to print current gun int. But we're doing something wrong, obviously. Or equal to 0. If this is equal to 0, then we're just going to set the current gun. And if this is greater than 0, then we're going to spawn in the second gun. Now when we press play, it should be printing. Okay, so 1 0 1 0. That's right. That's how it should be. Okay, but nothing is happening. Very interesting. And well, the gun is rotating. And I don't know why that is. Okay, because the second gun is also at the M1911. So what it should be is it should be the AK. Which we didn't. Okay, so that's why. Now we can see that the weapons are switching as when I scroll. But they are rotating, which is very interesting. Yeah. So they are rotating for some reason. And we can debug this by printing the current gun position as we intend to. So we can just print gun transform gun int dot position, and we can just print this to debug. So now we just exit, and now when we press play, we should get the full gist of why this is happening. So we should not be getting any other values other than these two that are currently displayed. Or these three, I guess. I don't know why there's three. Okay, what? Okay. Oh, I see. So when we rotate our head, the local rotation also gets changed, and we don't set the local rotation. So we should actually just probably do that. So instantiated gun dot transform dot local rotation is equal to gun transform gun int dot rotation. Okay, so this should just fix that bug. Very simple. And yeah, so now let's go back to Unity and test it out. Okay, yeah, so no more rotating guns as we twist our head. Okay, cool. Well, that was one bug solved. So that will be pretty much it for this video. In the next video, we will be looking at picking up and dropping items. And in the third episode, we will be looking at implementation of actual, firing the gun, maybe some enemies if we get to it, and an HUD display for a gun wheel. And so stay tuned for that, and see you next time.